Yesterday, there was an environmental disaster that literally no one could have predicted. No one did predict it, actually, and it has to do with the Keystone pipeline. It actually had a spill. Like the oil that's supposed to travel inside of it got out somehow, which seems impossible. I know it's made of metal, but it actually happened. The pipeline leaked Thursday morning, spilling about 5,000 barrels of oil or 210,000 gallons of oil southeast of the small town of Amherst in northeast South Dakota. It's like a logic puzzle to figure out where in South Dakota that is. But anyway, the pipeline has also had other smaller spills, by the way. 400 barrels each in 2011 and 2016, all in that same area, actually. In response to the reports coming out that that spill had actually happened, TransCanada said it shut down the flow of oil in the pipeline at 6 a.m. Quote, after a drop in pressure was detected in its operating system resulting from an oil leak that is under investigation. They give the rough idea, basically, of where it had happened there. And I know, it's like, what do you say at a time like this? The oil got out on the ground.
Yeah,
it seemed like such a sure thing.
Well, it was a sure thing. It leaked.
It did leak, and it leaks all the time. And so they're talking about this leak, and there were the two similar size leaks. But we did a story like 6 months ago. I think it was in Oklahoma, I'm not 100% sure there, maybe you can find the video, of the hundreds and hundreds of not reported leaks that have happened throughout.
Like Missouri, I think there was Missouri or Arkansas, actually.
It might have been somewhere around there, but it's just a routine thing now. It's not necessarily always 210,000 gallons, but jokes aside, like we've been saying the whole time, leak after leak after leak, we come back and say, hey, maybe this is inherently a dangerous way to fuel an economy. There's not a lot of damage done routinely from solar or wind leaks, okay? Maybe your hair gets messed up a bit, but that's about it.
Well, easy, partner.
It's a disaster for Ben.
It depends on the day.
Yeah.
The other thing here, and I have no expertise to lend to this, except that the number of times that a company has reported a leak and then that leak has been an accurate depiction of the leak, zero.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, so when they say, I hope it's true, but when they say generally 210,000 gallons, it turns out it's 2,210,000
Yeah, God
gallons,
only knows.
Yeah, I mean the general operating procedure in environmental disasters like this, energy company disasters. I mean, look, we all saw the China syndrome, right?
Of course, well, John didn't. But.
Right, it's a film. No, you downplay it. And so I hope that when we hear the truth about the leak, that it is no greater than that. But I wouldn't be surprised.
But they say they explain it away too. They say, well, this was caused by something that was installed improperly. Well, okay, right. That's what can happen if you have that. And then they said, like, based on what we know, and you'll probably get to this, John, but based on what we know, it hasn't affected the water table or the base of water.
That's what they say.
Right, based on what we know. But it could have, but here's when it wouldn't if it weren't there in the first place.
Yeah, look, if there was evidence that it had happened in the first 24 hours that it affected the water, fine. But I'm not simply gonna trust that because you haven't detected it in the first hour, we're good. And I know that the tribal council in the area has put out, they're talking about working with the federal authorities to try to contain this because obviously they feel responsible for that area, although they are not responsible for that pipe. That's TransCanada that does that. But there's a huge water reservoir there, like in that area. Not a reservoir technically, but there's the body of water that could potentially be contaminated. And I'm glad that you brought up that, it was just because of a ring that was wrong or there was a bad seam. But like when we said that this was gonna happen, what did you think we thought was gonna happen? That the pipe was evil and wanted to spill?
Yeah, but they
count
count
on
there's
gonna be some sort of mechanical failure.
Part of selling this is knowing that we expect there to be a leak, so that then when there is a leak, they can blame it on something or say, look, there are a few leaks here and there. That's part of getting this thing working. But when it's a catastrophe, then you can't really use that argument. Yeah. So that's why it's so critical to undersell the catastrophic part of this, to make it seem like, hey, there's a problem, we're fixing it, but this is routine. This is what happens when you have a pipeline. No one, after the Challenger blew up, would say, it was just a little problem with the O-rings. Right?
Fix the O-ring, we're good.
All we need to do is tighten the O-rings and then it's fine. Except 7 astronauts are dead, and so you can't make that argument.
Exactly.
With some tiles too, I think.
Some tiles.
I think that was actually what it was. Yes.
But
I'm not an expert.
It was the O-ring, but it was the tiles that...
Right, but because the O-ring was not sufficient, I think caused the failure of the tile.
Now we're getting into John territory here with this conversation.
I don't appreciate that. Anyway, let's jump back into this because obviously this spill is in its own right a terrible thing, although inevitable, and we will see others. At some point, we'll all be back here, maybe all three. We'll be sitting here and we'll be talking about the next 300,000 gallon leak or the next 2 million gallon leak. Or maybe we'll be talking about the endangered species that were killed in this particular leak. For now though, we have this one, and it comes at a particularly interesting time actually when it comes to these pipelines and TransCanada. So if you bring up this map here, you're going to see the darker line there, the black line, that is the Keystone pipeline. And if you see as it crosses through South Dakota, roughly about halfway down through South Dakota is where it's spilled. But you also see those other colored lines there. And that's where we get into Keystone XL, the expansion pipeline that was rejected by President Obama. And what's interesting about that is, although after his election, President Trump issued an executive order to clear obstacles so that that could be made, it's not just up to him. Actually, TransCanada still needed a permit from an independent 5-person Nebraska Public Service Commission at some point in the future. Actually, it turns out it's just in the next couple of days. They're gonna be ruling on this in just a few days to see whether Keystone XL should actually go forward.
Look, I do not like people who speculate without knowing, and I know nothing about this. But man, given the timing, right? It just reminded me when I read this the first time that given the timing, the incentive to lie and to undersell the leak is overwhelming right now.
I thought you were going to predict like sabotage.
But I don't think you can undersell this leak. I mean, the mere fact that there was a leak that spilled 210,000 gallons of oil, I think should be enough for a commission that, by the way, was already, they weren't just behind this Keystone thing entirely. You pointed out that President Obama, blocked it, and
yeah, but he didn't really mean it.
Right, right, and that's why Trump, of course, didn't. But also Secretary Clinton, when she was running for president, said finally, even though a lot of people didn't buy it at first, that she was not in favor of the pipeline. And so, I mean, when pressed, she didn't come out against it. What's that?
They're the same.
They're the same, right? Yeah, of course they are. They're exactly the same. Never mind. So it doesn't matter.
Okay, let's get back to the pipeline. Yeah. So yeah, you're right.
Sorry,
we got a tragedy here, people. Okay.
Support independent media. Come join us at the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.